our minds, especially the people that are all of us in this group, our minds really naturally go to cause and effect. Uh, and Hollywood has capitalized on our love for origin stories. How did this little rich kid become the Batman? How did Serena Williams come to dominate women's tennis? In every area of even our own life, we naturally, our minds just go to cause and effect. Where did we get in this situation? I can remember an early memory in fifth grade. I remember sitting down in an empty library with just the vice principal lecturing me about how I'm not going to have recess for the rest of the year while all the other kids were out playing. And my mind went to, how did I get here? What led to this effect? So we see it everywhere. And every worldview belief, whether it's atheism, agnosticism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, every worldview belief has to answer the questions of origins because it's the foundation that leads to the other big questions in life. And they're recognized as the big questions because they impact us directly in our lives. And we'll talk about that. So, and are you guys hearing me okay? And is the picture coming across okay?
Perfect.
All right. All right. So we're going to look at our origin story, the cause of the universe. And the reality is there can be only one. There's a lot of different things people are putting out there, but only one's going to be the answer, and it's going to have an impact. So we're going to do this talk in three parts. The first part is I'm going to make this, I'm going to show how simple this question actually is. People think that this is an impossible question to look into. It's too complicated, so a lot of people won't even bother with it. It's a lot more simple than people think. And that's going to be the first part is simplifying this. The second part is we're going to look at the evidence. And we got some of the greatest names and discoveries in science. And then finally, I want to apply it, make it applicable to your life so you can get something out of this that you put your time into. So, first part, I'm just going to follow the basic steps of the scientific method just to show how science and theology actually interacts very, very cleanly. So, the first step is you have an observation or a problem to solve. So, our problem is we're here, the universe exists, and most people can accept that. For those who don't, that's a whole other talk, but most people accept the universe exists. Fair place to start. And there's only two options. Either the universe had a beginning or it did not. This is either A or non-A. And with the law of the excluded middle, these are our only options. It either had a beginning or it did not. So at this point, people will have their theories, their beliefs, their models of what they think. And the cool thing is, the worldviews divide very cleanly on this issue. Basically, all the pantheist belief systems, naturalism, which atheism was tied to, science and common sense had always said that the universe had no beginning. It just always existed. In contrast, the biblical model made the claim that the universe had a beginning. And the evidence is already in. All the evidence we have says the universe had a beginning. There is no evidence supporting the universe did not have a beginning and is eternal. When all the evidence is on one side and there isn't evidence supporting the other side, even an Ohio State University football player can figure out what that means. And forgive me if any of you like that excellent football school to the south. I grew up in Michigan, so I'm a big Michigan fan, and they've been hurting us for the last couple decades. So I got to get out some angst. Now, if the universe had a beginning, once again, we only have two options. This is a lot simpler than people make it. Either that cause of the beginning had an intelligent creator involved, or it did not. Those are the only two options. Now, under those options, there are different possibilities. And if you do a review of all the scientific and philosophical literature, there is only a handful of possible general options. Here they are. Either, let's start with the cause had no intelligence involved. On that side, you could have a natural cause of the universe by itself. You could have some supernatural, meaning beyond this type of nature, a different type of nature, like a multiverse, for example. Or an abstract object is another one that's been suggested either in philosophical or scientific literature. And the only other one that I've ever found reviewing this is an immaterial mind, which is the one on the side that says there is an intelligent creator. So you only have four options to choose from. And you can say it could be a combination. So I guess that's a fit. So we have only a handful to choose from. So here's our different theories or beliefs we have. This option isn't this unlimited hard thing. Here they are. When you study the literature and the scholars, this is what they give us. And out of these four options, there's only going to be one answer. So the person on the top, his name is Quentin Jackson. This is a mixed martial art fights. And right now, Quentin's in some trouble. If you look on the left side, he is in what they call a triangle chokehold. Now, I've messed around with jiu-jitsu and I've been put in that triangle chokehold, and it's horrendous. To defend against this, you immediately have to you go from offensive. You think you're all good, you're on top, and then all of a sudden you have to get super defensive. You have to literally lay on your side, curl yourself in a ball, put both your hands on the other guy's elbow, and start inching your way in a little circle towards him to try to get out. And the whole time you're struggling to breathe. That's how I view how a lot of Christians respond when challenged with their beliefs by critics. They are just always on the defense. And I can understand that. I mean, all our beliefs are spelled out in the Bible, so they have the entire Bible to pick apart. But I take a different approach a lot. If you recognize the power of evidence that Christianity has, I like taking an offensive approach. And that's exactly what happened in this mixed martial art fight. If you watch on the right side, this is what Quentin Jackson did. He didn't do the little defensive thing that I usually do. He did this. And I didn't show the last few seconds because it was almost a little gross. That guy was so out cold. He looked like he was dead. He ended up being okay. But Christians have the power to not have to go on defense. Sometimes the best thing you can do is go on offense, but without being offensive, being gentle in your offense. All right, so we have our options. We have our different theories to choose from. And now step 3 of the basic steps of the scientific method. Now we look at the evidence. And the evidence is already in. We have some of the greatest minds in science. You see Einstein there, you see Hubble. I don't think I've ever seen Edwin Hubble without a pipe in his mouth. Every picture he's in. Stephen Hawking, multiple Nobel Prize winners. You have some of the best minds in science and some of the most amazing discoveries in science. And they've given us an answer as far as our beginning. And here it is. If you ever find Jenna Levin, she's a professor of astronomy and physics. And she was on one of these documentary series about where it all began. And that's an excellent little, I have it on my webpage. I'll have it on my webpage. But basically, here's the modern understanding of where we came from, which I'm sure you guys are aware. But for those who will watch this later, I want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So first, there was nothing. There was not anything of matter, energy, no space, no time. When Professor Levin mentioned it, she said, this is a lot more profound than a lot of people think. A lot of people think there was already some kind of space and the universe popped into that already existing space. She said, but no, it's more profound than that. There was no space. There was not anything of nature. Then all of a sudden, all of nature came into existence. And it was so condensed and so heated up with being condensed, not even light could escape. So if you were there, you still wouldn't be able to see it. There's not light escaping. And from that point, it just follows fixed laws and expands to the matter, energy, and the fabric of space-time that we know today. Now, if you look on the right side of this box, that is all of nature, everything that's of nature or of the universe. And if that's all there is, then that's the only box there is. That's all of reality. If there is something outside of nature, well, then the box is bigger and it might include something on that left side. But on the right side is just everything of nature. Now, what about the cause of the universe? Well, once again, either there was an intelligent creator involved or there was not. And there's only four options through the literature. So let's look at that first option, nature. Now, unfortunately, some physicists actually jumped on this for a while and they said, well, it could have been a quantum vacuum fluctuation. So nature created itself through quantum vacuum fluctuations. Some pantheists and New Age religions will say, well, God is energy, or we're all one with the universe. So God, nature, it's all one, and it's its own cause. So there are some options of nature being the cause. However, what we know with the beginning of the universe, what the evidence shows us is, if all of nature is there contained in that right side of the box, then one property of the cause of the universe we know is that the cause is outside of or beyond all matter, energy, space, time that's part of the universe. Because if nature is what was created, whatever created it, it had to be outside of or beyond that. So nature, there cannot be a natural cause because there was no nature. Nature was the effect. So the Big Bang, or the refined formulation of it, the lambda cold dark matter model, it disproves naturalism. So if you want to say something, let's say X creates or is a sufficient cause for or leads to something bit different, Y, okay, that's fine. But if you want to say X created X, that's logically incoherent. You could say X equals X. But that's just saying the universe just always existed. So it didn't need a cause because it always existed. However, because it had a beginning, we already know that's not possible. So another thing that we know is whatever caused the beginning, whatever caused nature, is also outside of time because time was created in that space-time fabric. So the cause is also outside of time. I mean, scientists and philosophers had long called for an uncaused first cause because they talked about the impossibility of an infinite regress of causes. You cannot go back. Each cause has a cause and just go on eternally. You have to have a starting point, an uncaused first cause. They just always assumed it was the universe. Once they found out it wasn't, now we need to find a different one. And so a lot of people, you guys probably understand the concept of entropy, but for those who watch this later, I'm just going to give a very basic thing of it. So second law of thermodynamics gives us the concept of entropy and basically says in a closed system, whether it's just this universe or a multiverse of itself, or whatever all of reality is, in a closed system, you're in any kind of natural system, you're going to be moving to increased entropy. And an easier way to understand this is, so over time that entropy always increases. An easier way to understand that is by flipping that whole graph upside down and just saying this: the nature of nature is ceaseless change. It could take 10 billion years for an atom to radioactive decay, but the thing is, it's going to. Nature is in constant change. And so it's always moving from more order to disorder. Or another way to say it is moving from a higher potential or power to do things down to the point of less power to do things. And so our universe, it starts off with the highest amount of order, or they call that a low entropy state, highest amount of order or potential or power to do things. And as time goes on, nature is just ceaselessly changing, and that change uses up that power or that fuel. It's like a car that gets, our universe gets that one fill up, and it uses up whatever that fuel is, whether you want to call it order or power to do things, and eventually will use that up. And it will result in what physicists call a heat death, where basically all the power to do anything is done. So you just have a cold, dark, dead universe with not a single star would be shining, and it's possibly expanding, and that's it. So we know the universe had a beginning because stars are still shining. And with this entropy, though, here's another interesting thing. So if you think of all the power the universe still has now to do things, think of all the stars which is nuclear fusion reactions going off every second. You think of all the power of all the stars and all the galaxies that the universe has, and if you go backward in time, it even has more power to do things. And if you go to that very beginning, it had the most power this universe ever had to do things. So another property we know is the cause is greater than the effect. So whatever the cause was, it has to be greater in power than the sum of all the power in the universe. So where we're at right now is we just looked at the first possible cause of the universe, nature, and invalidated it. There was no nature, so it cannot cause itself. Not only did we invalidate the first cause, we found three properties of what the cause of the universe is. We'll move to the next one. I was in a debate at University of Michigan. There was an atheist going around. He had some kind of podcast, and he was going to universities in North America speaking out against the existence of God. So when we were talking, and I asked him, well, what do you think was the cause of the universe? He gave a naturalist explanation. He just said some things in nature, like vacuum fluctuation. After a really short time, I showed that, well, naturalism's already disproven. It wasn't a natural cause. He changed and he said, okay, well, I don't like that you call it supernatural, but it is outside of nature. So we'll just call it, I can't remember if he called it immaterial or transcendent. He said, but it doesn't mean it's a God. It could be some transcendent type of nature, a different type of nature. And I said, well, you're right. That is a supernatural matter or force or multiverse is another possibility that's given. I said, but it should be a red flag that you just moved your belief system from the cause of the universe from a natural cause to some type of transcendent cause. So you got to wonder how strong your foundation is. And you don't just stop thinking there. Now we got to look at the supernatural possibility. Well, the supernatural possibility or transcendent or immaterial, whatever, a different type of nature that's outside of our nature, like a multiverse. It's also been invalidated already. When scientists discovered the universe had a beginning, a lot of them, including Alexander Vilenkin, called it a problem. Because if the universe was eternal, like we said, it doesn't need a cause. But if it had a beginning, now they know, uh-oh, we need some different type of uncaused first cause. So Arvind Borde, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin, they spent 10 years and wrote 5 seminal papers on this study of the multiverse or some kind of nature beyond our nature. And what they determined was, and made their statement very clear, is even if there was that in existence, a multiverse, it too would have the exact same need for it would still have a beginning and a need for a cause beyond itself. So even if you have multiverses, they also undergo ceaseless change, and they eventually would have run out of energy a long, long time ago in a multiverse far, far away. So they too would need a cause. So all you really did is you just pushed it back a step. Even if there was a multiverse, and that's very problematic, but even if there is one, even that they've shown will still need a necessary uncaused first cause. Now, here's one thing I don't think the person in the debate came up with, but it is a possibility. They said, okay, well, what if we had a supernatural type of matter and let's say it is, if your God can be in an outside of time in maybe a timeless state, whether that's another time dimension or whether it's a timeless state. I have no experience existing in a timeless state, so I can't really explain what that would be like. But either way, if you have some type of nature outside of time, if you have a God outside of time, why can't you just have some type of nature outside of time so it's not changing, so it wouldn't then use up all its energy? Well, this is my area. This equation down there, that's radiological physics, and probably the most basic equation of it. But really, in all of these equations describing how nature works, in all the equations, time is kind of inherent in there. So that T in there is time. So what this equation tells you is this. If you start with a certain number of radioactive atoms, let N naught means how many atoms you have to start with. So let's say you start with 100. And then let's say a certain amount of time passes, and that's the T in the equation. Well, what you can do is if you take the number you start with, N naught, and you multiply it by that e to the negative lambda t after it, that gives you the fraction that has already decayed. So you can get how many atoms you have left. But here's the thing. If in a timeless state where t goes to 0, the equation becomes N naught equals N naught, absolutely nothing can happen. Nature requires time to do anything. So if nature was in a timeless state, it will stay that way forever. Just picture ice. If you have ice and you're hoping for a phase change to water once the temperature changes, if there's no time changing, the temperature's never changing, that ice is never changing, it's staying that way forever. Now, an interesting thing with this gives us another property that's needed. So we have these 3 properties already when we were earlier in this talk. Here's another one. There's only 2 kinds of explanations. Richard Swinburne, philosopher, noted this. You can have a natural explanation. And a natural explanation, which science uses, you explain things using initial conditions, how they started off, and natural laws. Or you can have a personal explanation, which involves choice. In this case, another property of the cause of the universe is it has to be capable of choice. Because here's an example. The way I describe quantum vacuum fluctuations to people is I say things like, okay, you have the fields in the universe. Throughout space-time, you got these fields. And these fields are just roiling with energy. Picture it like my open palm. Now, sometimes the way these fields interact, they can become a fist. And that's like becoming a particle, matter. So energy becomes matter, but then it quickly goes back right into the field again. Now, if you are outside of nature and outside of time, the only way you can have something to have a change is for something to make a choice and choose that change. And some people say, well, what about if it was a God, if it was some immaterial mind, then it has to go through a process to change its mind. But that's a category area. They're confusing it with our kind of brains that do things in a step process through time. If there is a changeless God that always knew that he would create, then that's not requiring any kind of time changing. So another property then is you have to have a personal cause, something capable of choice, which also implies purpose. All right. So natural cause, invalidated. Supernatural, matter, force, multiverse, that's invalidated. The only thing we have left is an abstract object. For example, natural laws. Stephen Hawking in A Grand Design, excellent book. That was a really fun read. He said, well, you don't really need God as the cause because we'll have quantum gravity. So even though we don't have a law of quantum gravity yet, what he was saying is, through relativity, we understand how gravity works. We just can't explain it when it gets down to the size scales of quantum mechanics. At that gravity, our current understanding of gravity doesn't work. But when we figure out how quantum theory and gravity come together, that will show we have a cause of the universe, and that causes quantum gravity. And there was even a person, and I forget who it was now, I thought it was a mathematician, but he said that there's abstract objects like the number two, the number seven. And he said these swirling mathematical points could create a universe. So these are the only things that I've found and that others that I've studied have found in the literature as possible abstract object causes of the universe. But there's a problem. Stephen Hawking, so strong in science, but he often steps outside of science into another field, philosophy. And he's not really good in that area, even though philosophy undergirds science, because laws only describe, they don't cause anything. They describe what happens when you already have things in existence. For example, this is a really gross statement I use to kind of catch people's attention when I'm in a big audience. What I'll say is something like this. I want you guys right now to picture all of Hollywood's most beautiful people. And I'll tell you right now, fact, they are all attracted to me. And even all of you in this room, every one of you is attracted to me. Of course, all your computers, all your chairs, anything that has mass, anything made of matter is attracted to me. Because if you wanted to look at how things are attracted to each other with the gravitational force, here's the equation for it. I can literally calculate the force of a gravitational attraction between me and this unfortunate person closest to me in the audience. So the force is equal to the gravitational constant G. That's just a constant number that doesn't change no matter where you are in the universe or in time. It just is a number that never changes. M1 and M2 are the masses of the two things involved. For example, me and this unfortunate person in the audience, or this little girl in the picture and Jupiter. And then R is just the distance between those two masses. And with just those numbers, we can calculate this gravitational force of attraction between things. For example, let's say that M1, we'll use different masses. We'll use the Earth, Jupiter, Sun, white dwarf star. The Earth has a gravitational force of attraction that I can measure. And I'll just say, for me, when I jump up, you can see that force go into action and pull me down because I got about almost 200 pounds of it. Now, let's say we use this little girl and the Earth. Let's say she weighs 100 pounds on the Earth. If she was on Jupiter, which is a bigger mass, if you do this calculation, she'll weigh 253 pounds. On the Sun, 2,700 pounds. And on a white dwarf star, it is so dense and such high mass. And the distance between the girl and the center of that mass would be so small. She'd weigh 130 million pounds on that white dwarf star. And actually, she wouldn't look like that. She'd be a little meat puddle on it. Now, here's why natural laws, this just shows how they can't do anything. They just describe. Let's say no nature exists. Then what happens to M1 and M2? They're zero. And if you put those into the equation, the force of attraction is zero, so that law can't do anything. But it's even worse than that. Because if no nature is in existence yet, then that R also goes to zero because you don't have a distance between anything. So now the whole equation just becomes nonsense, just as is the claim that natural laws can create the universe is nonsense. And as far as just other abstract objects, this is where philosophy really needs to step in. Abstract objects, definitions are important for philosophy. They don't exist in cause and effect relationships by their very definition. So they are not a valid option as a cause to the universe. So here's kind of summary of it right now. As far as the possible causes that involve no mind, no intelligence. The three options that have been given in all science and philosophical literature have been invalidated. What positive evidence is there for them? They have fatal negative evidence against them. Here's all the things that these options have in common. They have not met the necessary properties that we found for the cause of the universe. And there better not be an alternative belief with more actual good positive evidence. But there is. When I talk to, for example, I went to UC Berkeley, and when there was a lot of professors who were atheists, and there was a lot of in this there was hundreds of people there, and there was atheist groups, graduate and undergraduate, and we were having debates with them. And what a lot of them would say when we showed that all these no intelligence involved causes, they're invalid, they would then say, well, I'm just agnostic on it because we just can't know, so we'll just wait to see. But what I tried to get them, what needs to be understood is that's a logical error in thinking to say that. It's called the ad futurus fallacy, and a good example of it. What they're actually saying is, well, there's no evidence right now that supports things that on the no intelligence involved side, and I'm disregarding this other evidence over here. That I'm just going to wait until I'm just going to wait till something comes along that fits what I want. Because if there's no evidence supporting these, and there's actually evidence over here, it needs to be dealt with if you want to call yourself rational and reasonable in your decision. So here's the last option. The cause of the universe was some immaterial mind. Now, what kind of positive evidence we have for that? Well, here's a start. If this is the effect, the beginning of all nature, all the universe, then we talked about the properties the cause must have. It has to be outside of or beyond all of nature. It has to be beyond time and uncaused cause. It has to be greater in power, cause is greater than the effect, than the sum of all the power in the universe. And it has to be sufficient to explain choice. Here's one other one that I didn't mention. If there's a law of conservation of matter and energy, that's, natural law of conservation of matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed. Yet all of it, all the matter and energy was created out of nothing that was in existence before. So whether you're talking just about the closed system of the universe or the bigger system that might involve something else, it's not created nor destroyed, yet all of it was created out of not anything in existence before. That violates the natural limits that we know of in the universe. So let's just make this, if this isn't clear already, let's just make it more clear by using just more direct terms. The cause of the universe is outside of nature, supernatural by definition, or transcendent, immaterial, but supernatural fits. It's outside of time, uncaused, that's eternal. Greater in power than all the universe, almighty, it's a fair term to apply. Sufficient to explain choice, that's personal, and acts beyond the natural limits of the universe, that's miracle working by definition of what a miracle is. So we have a supernatural, eternal, almighty, personal, miracle working cause of the universe. What does that sound like to you? And I'm not trying to force science back into the Bible. The Bible gave this millennia before science or any other belief system had touched on it. So the last step of the scientific method, well, not the last step, second to last step of just basic steps is your conclusions. What does the evidence show us? Well, first of all, science and theologies, they interact. And I have a new model of interaction between science, theology, and really every other field of study. William Dembski actually in one of his conferences said that it was the accurate model. And that'll come out in a book probably in the next few months. Another thing is this interaction. So that little space where science and theologies cross over and they both are looking at the same thing, this is where we find where things are accurate or not. And in that interaction, we find that in talking about the beginning and cause of the universe, all the different worldviews had that foundational issue falsified, their foundational claim falsified. The Bible, on the other hand, made multiple clear, specific predictions 3,000 years in advance of modern science. I can give you a dozen just on the beginning and cause of the universe. If you can predict not only what no one should have known, but also going against all the other thoughts throughout time, and you get it right, that's one of the best tests for truth in science. I mean, Einstein, when he's putting out his relativity theory, a lot of people just dismissed it until some of his predictions, time dilation, the bending of light around, really dense objects like the sun in an eclipse, when these predictions started, which no one else was guessing, were actually shown to be accurate, oh, everyone jumped on then. This is the exact same situation we have with the Bible, but on such a higher, more amazing level. And there better not be more evidence, but there is. We'll get into that. One question, if anyone ever asks, well, how can you know if there's a God behind something? Like, how do you know there's a God behind the Bible? What about the Vedas? What about Stephen Hawking's grand design? What about, the Quran or whatever? Or how do you know there's God behind Jesus? How do you know he's not behind Muhammad or Joseph Smith or anything else? Well, my simple answer to this is, how would I know if there's a God behind something? Well, one thing is, it better be able to produce something humans are not capable of. That is one thing it must have. I was going by this huge gathering I saw, kind of had like a little cult feel to it. So I had to go over. So I go over there, I ended up finding out who their little leader was. And I asked them, I was like, well, so what are your basic beliefs? And they start giving me some of the basic Christian stuff, but then they diverted. And so I said, well, do you accept Jesus is who he claimed and the Bible claimed? They said, yeah. And they said, and he already came back, or they said she already came back. And I said, oh, female now? And I said, where is she? And they said, oh, she's living in New York. And my little troublemaker mind almost said, well, is she pretty? What's her number? But I didn't want to get on their bad side. So I ended up just saying, well, what makes you think that this woman is Jesus? Come back. And they said, oh, the things she says. And I said, okay. I said, here's the thing, though. When Jesus came, there was predictions given hundreds or more years before his time that pointed directly and only to him. He also performed miracles. He also claimed his own death. He also rose from it and gave many convincing proofs over 40 days to enough people who are willing to dedicate their lives for it. Until she gives evidence of that, I don't really have a lot of credibility with her. All right. I need some evidence. This is beyond human capacity. Otherwise, what am I going to care about it? So when I was at that UC Berkeley with all those professors, hundreds of really brilliant, intelligent people who were atheists, I asked them, I said, if you don't think the Bible has a God behind it, if you think it's just a human product, then throughout all of history, if it's just either coincidence or luck or whatever, then throughout all of history, there's going to be many other examples that can match multiple clear specific predictions given thousands of years in advance of modern science. What are they? And one of them, after a long silence, one of them said, well, there's errors in the Bible. And I said, well, you see what you just did, right? You didn't answer my question. You went off on a different topic. I can answer that. But let's stick on this. If you think it's just man-made, give me the other examples, because there's going to be other ones. There's going to be multiple other examples that can match it. What are they? Again, so after a long silence, someone gave me something. Again, it was another rabbit trail. I don't remember what it was. So I asked it one more time. And then I let the silence go on really awkwardly long. And then I said, oh, the silence is speaking loudly, isn't it? Because there's nothing that compares. This is beyond human capacity. And it's not just me saying this. Those closest to understanding these discoveries, they get it. The one who called it a Big Bang, Sir Frederick Hoyle, he was the atheist. And when they told him, oh, it looks like the universe had a beginning, he said, that's scientific genesis. He gets it. Here's others. Robert Jastrow, he stated that, and he was either at the time either an atheist or agnostic, but he said the world began abruptly in an act of creation, that there are what I or anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. And this is echoed by mathematicians Sir Arthur Eddington and others. Hugh Ross, who I'm sure a lot of you probably interacted with his material and maybe him as a person, and just amazing intelligence and also humility. Such a great addition. But anyways, you might have read about this. I got this out of one of his articles. He said he was giving a lecture to scientists at NASA, I think in Houston, and he told the NASA director, he's like, here's my argument. And the director had told him, okay, you can, this is all fine, but you are not allowed to use the word God here. And he was like, okay, well, the evidence points to this, a causal agent beyond space and time designing the universe for the benefit of human beings. Can I say that? And the NASA director said, yes, that's okay. Which fits exactly the properties of the cause of the universe that we know have to be fulfilled. Mathematical physicist Frank Tipler, he stated, from the perspective of the latest physical theories, Christianity is not a mere religion, it's an experimentally testable science. And then you probably heard this quote also from Robert Jastrow. For the scientist who has lived his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountain of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak, our origins, the cause of the universe. And as he pulls himself up over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who've been sitting there for centuries. So now we're at the third part. We looked at the evidence and looked where it points. Now I want to show how this applies to you. I want to make this practical to you. I much prefer mountain biking to staring at a computer and making PowerPoints. The reason why I stare at a computer and do research and make PowerPoints is because I know what a relationship with a purposeful God can mean to a person, and I desperately want others to have what I'm getting out of it. So if the effect is this universe, we talked about the cause of the universe, the properties. Here's the necessary properties. And here's another effect then. If that's the cause of the universe, how does that affect me? Well, it affects you directly in the biggest way. When people are asking the question, what is the meaning to life? What is the purpose of my life? Not everyone, the vast majority of people think this is not something that's even answerable. It's just too complex of a question. Once again, this is where my teacher side comes out. This is a lot simpler than you think. Just follow the thought process. If you're asking what is the purpose of my life, it directly depends on whether God exists or not. If no creator exists, then if we are just the result of accident, then we are only the purposes that we make up. And none of them are of higher or lesser purpose objectively than any other one. On the other hand, if a purposeful creator of life exists, then this whole effect of the universe and us was created with a purpose with a capital P, meaning an objective purpose that is true for all people of all times. What I usually do when I illustrate this is I show a picture of two batteries tied by fishing line tied to another really long fishing line. And I take a picture of it and show it. And then I ask them, what is the purpose of this? And people come up with different things like making a circle, trying to fish, a bunch of different crazy things people come up with. And I said, you know what? Those purposes could be used for. So those are purposes with a capital P, with a lowercase p. They're possible purposes. But how do you know the objective truth about what something was, what its purpose of creation was? You have to ask the creator of it. That's the only way you can know the objective truth about what a purpose for something is. And that little device that I showed, I said, I made it. I'm the creator. So I'll tell you the purpose with a capital P. We use it as a little, like a door knocker. It's like a prank thing to make people think someone's knocking at the door when there's no one there. But the same thing is true on the biggest scale. The cause of the universe has all the properties of a purposeful mind creating with a purpose for us, an ultimate purpose. And that purpose, that same Bible that made those predictions beyond human capacity, also tells us that the purpose for us being here is to get to know and have a love relationship being in that family with God and accepting the sacrifice that was made, he made for us, that Jesus atoned for all of the wrong we did on the cross so we don't have to be separated from him. So if we just accept that plan and be pulled into his family, we've achieved our purpose. Now, you can have other purposes in life, family, job, whatever, but those are purposes with a little p that are all different priorities depending how they relate to the big P. And here's the awesome thing. There's a feedback loop going on this side. On the side with no creator, there's no feedback loop because there's no creator involved. On the other side, there is. Because here's why. If there is a purposeful creator, and not only do the no intelligence involved options, they all have the same qualities. They don't have any evidence supporting them. They have fatal flaws against them. They don't meet any of the properties, and so on. The immaterial mind, a purposeful creator, has explanatory power, explanatory scope, lack of ad hoc, testability, predictability, cumulative case, coherent answers. The evidence for the God of the Bible is on a level in every field of study that applies, is on a level of evidential support no other belief system can reach. And what that gives us is security, because our meaning in life, our purpose, is where we get all of our goals and objectives and directions in life and our final destination. It's all from that purpose. And our hope depends on that purpose being fulfilled or not. And if we have an almighty creator and we're following his purpose and getting into his family so we can have an eternal relationship, then our hope is as secure and reliable as all the evidence we have supporting that purposeful creator. And on the other hand, if there is no creator, or if there is a purposeful creator and you choose to ignore that creator's purpose, then you don't have a feedback loop supporting you. Basically, all the goals and objectives and destinations in life you hope for, you hold in a wet paper bag. Because at any moment, you don't have anything protecting against that. This life can take any of those things away. And especially when you die, it all falls out that bag. So our origin story, we love the origin stories. But what's most important is, how does this origin story inform our journey and destination story? And what I'm hoping I'm applying here, and that either you can use for yourself if you haven't accepted that purpose yet, or for someone else that you care about, that you want. If you recognize that all the evidence supports that there's just this creator who created you and wants you in his family, he's already done what's needed so you won't be separated from him through Jesus. You just accept that, then you have a secure, reliable purpose and hope unlike anybody else.